here. And we are now moving to the panel discussion where we have Steph and Jessica and Billy and Rinaldo joining us all. Is it possible? Can we bring everybody back in here? I think we can. And we have Steph in here, and we have Jess in here, and we have Billy, and we have everybody in the house. Nobody got, I thought for a moment that maybe you went in the wrong door, or you kind of left the building or anything. No, everybody is back in here, right? Well, look at us. I'm very impressed with just different insights that we actually got through today. And it's always very encouraging to see all the different kind of little perspective on the work that is being done in UX, in research in general. Maybe I just going to start briefly. And again, dear friends who are watching us right now, we have around like 20 minutes or so to have a conversation, answer your questions. I did prepare some of mine, but I'm very much open-minded and looking forward to your questions as well. And maybe just one question I would like to start with would be for Steph, because I just happen to be in a situation where, and I think that many of our listeners, readers, observers here, I guess participants would be in the same situation as well. It doesn't seem to matter as if you happen to be in a relatively small company, relatively small organization, right? You might have a person, maybe two, maybe a few, who happen to be doing user research. But then every now and again, if it's just, let's say, one person or two people in a really large organization, it's a really complex problem that you need to solve, then it might not be enough and you will end up with gaps. You'll end up with situations where you just didn't do enough research. Well, the question is, how do you know when enough is enough to actually bring the project or product to that needs to scale potentially to a pretty reasonable state? How much research is actually enough or good enough for a job like that? Maybe that's also a question that could be opened up to everybody, not only the staff. But we can start with staff.
So there are two schools of thoughts, I think, and there is this concept of just enough research, enough to make certain decisions. But I think research is one of those things where it's kind of how long is a piece of string, because like if you wanted to find out all the answers in the world, you can, but it'll take forever, and then you might not be able to do anything with it. So it is really less about what research do you do and how much, but which questions do you need to answer in order to move forward as an organization. So it might well be, which questions do you need more certainty on in order to decide on the business model? Which things do you need to understand better in order to define your product roadmap for the next quarter or the next half year, next 5 years? Well, 5 years is a bit long in tech anyway. So I think I would start with that. So rather than asking, so how much research is enough, focus on what questions need answering. And then and then how can we answer it? Maybe we not be able to answer it with 100% certainty, which we never will, really. So can we answer it well enough that we can make a well enough informed decision that we're comfortable with, and be understanding that maybe we only have, enough data to say we are 60% certain, and that's good enough, and we'll have to go with it. So that's the risk you take, but at least you know that that's the risk you're taking.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Jess, Billy, you want to add? Or Rinaldo, you want to add something to it? Oh, I think Jesse, you are muted. Jess, maybe?
Maybe, yeah, check the settings.
It's maybe the audio settings, right? In the meantime, Billy, I heard that you just wanted to say something, didn't you?
Yeah, can you tell? It's a really interesting question. I think there is a level of comfort that you're going to have when you're doing your research of understanding the problem. So you're going to start with your assumptions and you're going to do your research. You're going to reach a point where you feel like you have an understanding of the context, understanding of a path forward. And I think that's where you should move on, because you, like we said, you can spend time doing research. You can spend time doing design work. You can spend time tweaking development. Any stage of product development could be, as long as you want it to be to make it perfect. But if you get to a level of comfort, I think that's when you should move forward. You should maybe even decide that before you start. Like where can we move forward from here? We want to know, like for us, our product, we knew that we had issues with data tables. So what do we need to know so that we can make the next decision? And what is nice about what we do in product design is we can go back and change that, right? But we need to move forward first with always, I guess, having an eye backwards. But if you get to a point where you're like, I think this is what we should do, let's go forward, I feel confident, and then try it.
Yeah, so that brings me to, oh, here we go. Jess, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly
And
fine.
we can hear you as well.
Oh, great. No, I mean, I'm right there with Steph and Billy, and I just remember this great article by Tom Kerwin, and the title is just the same as your question: how much research is just enough research? And he points out this false sense of certainty. It doesn't exist. You'll never get there. So I guess you have to set for yourself like a goal that you want to reach that determines when you feel ready, and stop expecting 100% certainty on your endeavors.
Makes sense. It's interesting because when I think about Rinaldo's work, it's like the other way around. Companies come to you and they want research and they want your insights and they want to bring it all in. And these are like 100 really large companies. Do you feel like they come to you because they just produce, I mean, they're just not satisfied with the checkout, or do they actually genuinely believe in the fact that UX is a good thing and that UX research is a very good thing? And because most of the companies, from what I can tell, they're not necessarily or could not necessarily be considered to be design driven.
Yeah, I think there's always it's a case-on-case basis when it comes to the clients coming to us. But most of the times, what I found from my experience, clients like having a neutral third-party research institute auditing their whole experience. Most of the times, it's clients coming to us to audit their entire search experience. It's very rare that the site would focus only on product pages or only on checkout. And then they also like to see how they stack up against our benchmark database, because we have that database of 100 and more sites they can see how they fare against. But yeah, it's just they're mostly interested in just an overall UX experience, both on desktop and mobile, of course.
Right. And so what do we do then if you happen to be in a company which doesn't have any research culture yet? So it's wonderful if you happen to be working in Balsamiq. I think that this is already done at this point, right? But what do you do if you just happen to be working with your colleagues, maybe where the management is very much feature driven and release driven, and we've all been in situations like this. How do we argue about research and then it's worth investing into research? We probably need to bring up some case studies or numbers, right? I always think about what Steph said: speak the language that they speak and try to frame, UX research as something that will help them, right? But what would be a good start if you happen to be on a very tiny budget to make change in the company, or start or initiate a change in the company? Anybody wants to take it? Billy, I can see it in your eyes.
Okay. I feel like I've faced this before at previous jobs, and there's a number of ways you can do it, and it is dependent on your leadership's position. So if they are really, driving forward, so that means there's a lot of past projects that we've worked on, and now how successful are those past projects? Do you hear from customers about those products? Do you hear from the product manager about trying to make the product? Like, did that whole thing go successfully? Was it perfect? Does everyone love it? Likely it's not the case, especially if there was no research done. So my tip is I usually go to the past. I make presentations about what we could have done to the leadership and say, this is a new way we can move forward. This is called, UX. This is called design thinking. We should talk to people to understand what their actual pain points are, because we thought we knew last time and we were wrong, and now we have to fix it, and that's going to cost us more money. So let's save that money and do it up front.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Anybody else has any quick tips on how to get UX research in order in the company?
Yes, I did. I had to sort of shoehorn a bunch of this stuff when I was back when I was an interface developer. I want to say back in the 2000s, nobody ever really heard of user research. And so what I did was I just dragged people into a room and made them test a prototype. And I basically just ignored telling anybody about it. It's just that, it was mostly for my benefit. because there wasn't any other developer who would care about the interface. But and then it was one of those things that you did first and then explain later. Because once people understand the results and the impact that it has, it's far more impactful than if you tried to justify it before you did it. So it was one of those cases where cart before the horse. Yeah, obviously, like, it meant that I worked extra hours and I really shouldn't have, but I cared enough about it that it made a change. And then later on it became easier, right? Later on it became part of the process, but it has to start somewhere. So I may not necessarily advise that today. Hopefully nobody is in that situation anymore.
Yeah. I do believe that there has been a very significant shift in terms of how we, I think in the industry in general, see UX, see the role of design. I think it's there. I mean, I have a strong feeling that something must have shifted quite significantly. We didn't have major conversations about accessibility 10 years ago. Now, I cannot even imagine a serious project starting off without the notion of accessibility from the very start. We still are not there where, we would be considering the privacy concerns and the security concerns and all the other important considerations. But in terms of accessibility and UX, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that, kind of rephrasing myself from a while back, I guess, we have the seat at the table for sure at this point, don't we?
Just want to add really briefly also, we have so many tools available to us now that we you can do research quite cheaply these days, and you can do it remotely, like what Jess was talking about. It doesn't require you to have lab.
Exactly. So that makes me very hopeful and excited as well. Well, let's turn at this point to some of the questions that came up from the audience. We have one, and that's probably a question for Rinaldo at this point. A lot of small and medium-sized enterprises will use fairly out-of-the-box e-commerce templates like Magento and Shopify and so on. If you had to pick one, I don't know if you're in a position to pick one at this point, would you say that one is better than the or maybe some are better than the others? Oh, I put you in a really uncomfortable spot right there.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I simply straight out of the gate, I cannot pick one because that's why Baymore in good conscience cannot recommend any off-the-shelf third-party solutions for any part of the UX, whether that's product pages, filtering functionality, search functionalities, or checkout. Because what happens when sites or companies do that, you don't have that within your control. So then you end up with a list of specs of things that you need to resolve, and then you just go around to different vendors. Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And usually these companies won't name them, cannot do that. So you're basically stuck with these usability problems that you can't really resolve. Of course, and the question is for small enterprises, that's obviously not always possible to build everything in-house. We did audit many of these platforms. Some of them came to us as clients, but some of that stuff is under NDA, so I really can't talk about who's better than who. But I can tell you this much: there isn't one, for instance, checkout solution that doesn't have any UX issues related to it. So it's just about potentially, so to speak, to pick your poison and to see which platform would you be able to pick and end up with least amount of UX issues. But all of them come with UX issues, and that's why I recommend implementing your own checkout flows or any other aspect of your UX or e-commerce site. Of course, that's not always possible, but I cannot speak on any potential solutions here, unfortunately.
Okay, that's fair enough. It's always kind of a story because I think Andre has brought out an interesting point, saying that, referring to the question that I brought up earlier, right, about me firmly believing that we are living in a better space today than we used to live like 10 years ago, saying I was in quite some companies, either as an employee or as a service provider, and only had one company doing UX research.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, frankly, I am working with a lot of legacy companies, having a lot of legacy where I always feel lost. I always dream about Microsoft Windows 3.11 dashboards for some reason, NFTP clients back in the day. So that's kind of my life. I do believe that there are some kind of good UX research kind of initiatives coming up, and there are more than I think in the past. But maybe also kind of another thing that could be interesting for me to explore. Are there any really useful resources out there, be it like specifically UX magazine, UX podcasts, UX tool. I mean, probably tons of tools, of course. UX books, anything that you would just say, hey, go and get it now. This is the thing to get, to learn, to subscribe to today. Anybody wants to take this?
Interesting.
I want to say there's one book that I know is useful. It's a book written by a colleague of mine, Greg Bernstein. He collated a whole bunch of case studies by, I cannot remember, I lost count of how many of us from the industry. But it's a book called the Research Practice Book. And it's one of the books that I actually started recommending to students that I'm teaching at university on research, mostly because it gives you an idea of the range of issues that researchers end up having to deal with in the industry, from dealing with stakeholders, how you start your first job, how do you deal with imposter syndrome, and all the stuff that you came across as being a researcher. So that is probably one book I would recommend. It's less about methodologies, because that you can find online anywhere, but it's about the existence of being a researcher, I suppose you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much, Steph. Right, Jess?
So one community that I like a lot is run by Jared Spool, who is a UX expert, Mr. Excellent. It's called Leaders of Awesomeness, and he organizes webinars every Monday on everything UX, and he has great tips on how to get stakeholders buy-in, how to get started, how to adapt research. He talks about all things UX, but he has great content on research, and he's always doing so these great workshops. And I think it's very refreshing, because there's a lot of theory out there that we've seen time and time again, and he gets this approach. He has this approach that's very down to earth, and so I think it's a great resource.
All right. Rinaldo, I heard about one resource that you might be familiar with.
Yes, so Baymard Premium is our paid service that contains all of our UX findings. However, our blog has more than enough to get started with. So that's definitely a recommendation. But just so it's not that I'm just talking about Baymard and our blog here, I also pulled up the books here. I just wanted to get the authors right. So the one I really liked is Think Like a UX Researcher by David Travis. So it's more like Steph was saying, it's more about strategic view of product design. It's not really necessarily that much about the methodology. And then since we also had a couple of questions about smaller enterprises and things like that, this book came up immediately to mind. So it's called The User Experience Team of One by Aaliyah Booley. So those are a couple of resources that I would maybe recommend, except for Baymard and blog and catalog.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you so much. And we have Billy.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was thinking a few things. One is I obviously want to plug our website, balsamic.com/learn. It's our blog about educational resources, which has a lot of stuff for non-designers or new designers, people who don't do this stuff every day and don't have it in their title. But another thing I was thinking of is I have a hard time always selecting where I learn from, because I learn from so many different resources or from people. So I would recommend trying to join online communities and see what people are talking about. We have a Slack channel for this, and a lot of places you can meet professionals and just ask them direct questions, because again, there's methodologies everywhere. This is how you should do contextual inquiry, or how you should do cards, or whatever you're going to do with people that you want to learn from. But like, what is it like? Like, that's what you want to kind of talk one-on-one with people sometimes. So try to seek people you can ask these direct one-on-one questions to. I think that's where you'll get a lot of learning as well.
Mm-hmm. So from my end, I think one methodology that really changed my kind of view on navigation information architecture would be Jerry McGovern's Top Tasks. I think that this is this is almost a classic at this point, but if you can find, he also has a book on that, of course. That's definitely would be kind of my choice. Maybe just as we're wrapping up here, I think just one final note, which I find a little bit interesting, because every time I explore research and I see companies kind of conducting research and finding things, I realize that humans are such interesting creatures. This is unbelievable. So because one thing that came up in the chat was, for example, I don't remember who that was. I think it was Kim asking the question, Why would people click the backlink that you mentioned, Rinaldo, right? Instead of using the browser's back button? And I don't mean to steal the answer to that question, but I think I have a hunch of why. Because what I've been experiencing are remarkable fears that people have when using mobile devices. One of them is a fear of the refresh button because all the data might be lost. The other is the fear of the back button because all the data might be lost. And the third one is, when you have a very complex form, not having the ability to save. This really freaks people out, right? So because they might be hitting refresh or accidentally just swipe in the wrong direction, and then off they go, the data is lost. Rinaldo, does it match with your expectations why backlink is important?
Yeah, so we find actually during our large scale testing, there's a subset of users that always use the back button. And what we found during our testing is that when it comes to improperly implementing the browser back button behavior, perception matters a lot. So it's about what users perceive to be a new page. It's not about what technically is a new page. So sometimes when users open an image gallery overlay, that to them feels like a new page, even though technically it isn't. You're still on the product page as a user. So it's just a matter of making sure that users really don't know what technically is a new page. So it's just about implementing that in a proper sense, and then using that push state, HTML APIs, and all that kind of stuff. But yes, there's a subset of users that definitely still to this date use the browser back button. And I mean, to your point, to this date, even when we test, there's still users who double click on sites. That's still a thing. So it's, yeah, in terms of why they do it, that's a good question, but I can definitely confirm that there's still users who do use the browser back button.
All right. Well, then I'm going to go back to the panel here. Maybe we could just end with a bit of insight, just one of your personal favorite insights from user research that you've done. One of the most surprising things maybe that you've discovered, one of the most unusual things. And now I always look at Billy. I'm sorry. I look at Billy, and I'm not going to give the stage to Billy. I don't know. So Steph or Jess, do you have anything?
I have to think about it.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
So recently, we our PM got into his mind that he wanted to change the onboarding to our tool, and it was a hunch that he had together with customer service. So he went for it. I was like, okay. When I saw it, that I did the heuristic review, I was like, I think this is a bit overwhelming. And he had all sorts of arguments in favor of his design. So it was just like, let's just test this. And something that has been always on my mind since I did that is that I just put it in front of people 5 seconds, like 6 people, and they were like, oh my God. And that expression he ran out of words. So to me, one of the most interesting things about research is not something that I've seen in studies, but how it quickly changes people's mind when they see customers using the thing that they're making.
Right. Okay. Billy or Steph, any insight that you'd like to share?
Oh man, I had an interesting one that so I was working on, it was called a product creation tool. So you create artwork on your computer, you upload it, and then you can sell different types of merchandise with it. And it was a kind of a slow process. So the system that needed to run to generate all these images, whatever, to make like a t-shirt look like a t-shirt and a mug, took a while. It took like 30 seconds or something, and the user had to wait. And we were trying to figure out ways for them to not leave, because if they left, it would cancel the process. So we had different loaders and we were testing. And for some reason, no one liked any loader that we picked. But if we did a ghost page where the page would not change, it looked like we had basically gray boxes. You'll see this a lot on websites that slowly load. Everyone loved that one. And it was because the page didn't move. And which we figured out afterwards, that if you had a loader and then the page loaded, a lot of things were like moving around, and a lot of users didn't like that. So they liked the consistency of the page looking like it would eventually look, which totally, I don't know, it didn't make sense to me, but it was like, this is so interesting. So we made a ghost page and it would load and nothing would shift on the page. And we had a lot less issues with people bouncing and stuff. And I thought that was so
here we
interesting.
go. Here we go.
Yeah.
We just coined the term ghost paging. So now this is going to be ghost pages all over the internet, thanks to Billy, of course. Right?
Sorry, everyone. People like it.
And yeah, all right. And that's cool. That's cool. Steph, final words from you as well.
So this probably comes with, I've got some really random insights just from having done like a bunch of sort of jobs to be done type research, because those ones, when you do like commercial stuff, you find some really weird human things. So I told you one about like people are skeptical of free, even though the behavioral economics tell you that free is good, but actually people are skeptical about free because they want what's the catch. So that's one from earlier. But there's something else. This is from when we were doing a lot of research around news, and there's quite a lot of things that we end up doing because we're just killing time. And so people read news as mostly, or follow news as a way to fill time, in the morning. They do it like, it's like a 3 times a day thing during lunchtime, or usually sometimes in the evening. That happens fewer.
Oh,
but
that's me.
But see, and then that's also where, actually, who doesn't read the news in the morning and at lunch? Actually, is the question I would have. But that is also your Facebook and Twitter time and your social media time. And if you want to get yourself off social media, just do something while you're killing time. Like find something else that you can do while you're killing time if you want to bring yourself off social media, because that's the job that these things do. It allows you to kill time with hopefully credible, entertaining content. And there you go.
Excellent. Well, that's wonderful insights. By the way, dear friends, you can hear. Oh, you're here, dear friends. You will find way more insights by Stephanie and also by Rinaldo in our upcoming workshops that are going to happen soon, very soon. I just don't have the dates in front of me. But thank you so much, everyone, for the wonderful discussion, for the panel. Please take a look at the Smashing Comms webpage and follow all these wonderful people, because they always have something to share, new insights, and they do incredible research. So please go ahead with that. So thank you so much for being here, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you all again.